Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to What's up, everybody? Welcome to Get Booked Solid. We are back. We're back, everybody. We got me, Lacey Book, and the amazing David Meltzer being chauffeured all around. I can't wait until I, too, have a driver.
I've had a driver for a long time for two reasons. One, I'm a shitty driver, and two, I get much more done when I'm driven around. So duplicative positive in today's world. I suggest highly, if you can afford it, to have a driver.
Where are you at these days?
Well, we're missing you and Lacey because we do monthly masterminds, as you know, at SoFi Stadium, where I'm blessed to have our offices with you guys. And we just did a mastermind here. We had incredible people, and as always, just blessed to have such an enormous stadium behind us. But can I share my takeaway from the mastermind? Because it's really a significant one. So we had Edwin Ariave, who's a friend of mine, Teddy Mellencamp's husband, was here, and we were talking about how he overthinks things. And he was talking about how he overthinks only negative things. He realized that he's never really overthought positive things. And then even more enlightening to me was he said when he's overthinking things, he's procrastinating because the only way to solve overthinking is to take action. And so therefore, the reaction that is not productive is called procrastination, which obviously I talk about a lot because we all know that the antidote to procrastination is to prioritize. But what I found fascinating was where he took it from what happens if we procrastinate. I've never thought of this. When we procrastinate for too long, it creates paranoia. And so an outcome of overthinking and the procrastination of taking action from overthinking, and since we only overthink negative things, is paranoia that's created of negative things. And so then I started thinking down the rabbit hole of I would rather be paranoid about great things happening and be obsessed on great things happening. And so I am going to try, I don't know if it's possible, to be very intentional of overthinking positive things, of how great things is, because fear is thinking about and obsessing on all the bad things that could happen, and faith is obsessing on all the good things that could happen. Now I'm going to procrastinate when I'm thinking about all the good things that can happen and being paranoid or obsessing on all the good things that can happen. I thought it was an incredible epiphany about the relativity of faith and fear and how action can overcome the procrastination as well as the paranoia.
It's so we are currently in Naples, Florida, and we are hunkering down for the very large hurricane coming our way. And I think that maybe you talked to Sean in advance. Maybe he was texting you so that you could.
I've been crying myself to sleep every night since his birthday because I haven't been able to talk to him. I just sent him killer brownies, and then I'm like, I hope he doesn't die, and we send him killer brownies that killed him.
I'm already deep into the killer brownies.
That's right.
And by the way, I don't know if you saw when I got here and I was so excited. Lacey was like, "Look what the Meltzers sent," and I opened up my box of killer brownies. One was missing.
Yeah, I'm stressed in this hurricane. Listen, I mean, I had no self. But it's funny that you bring this up because we in the Black Diamond Club, we do a weekly podcast that's for members only. And Sean was out of town this week. And so hence me eating the brownie. But Sean was out of town this week. And I actually did a podcast by myself and I titled it Fear Factor. And I talked about this exact subject about how our minds love to emphasize and amplify negativity, right? Like it's something that our minds are really, really good at. And it's so easy for us, I think, as business owners, entrepreneurs, human beings, to go down the rabbit hole of fear-based thought processes. And like, I am admittedly, for those of you out there, I am in the middle of it right now. I have come up with every scenario that could happen with this hurricane, probably possible. But it's one of those things, and you get obsessed over it, right? And so I created the podcast because I was like, I don't usually get this anxious or fear-based, but I was like, when people live like this, when people live like this, he's calling me out with his eyes.
Okay, Julie.
Yeah. What are some mechanisms or actions that you can take to overcome the obsession around negative thoughts and fear-based processes? And I love the acronym of fear is false evidence appearing real, because it really is that. It really is this: you have a thought, you have an idea, and then you go out there and you literally feed the fear with everything that validates your current thought process. And that's why if you don't take action and face it, to let it move through you and overcome it, you're going to go down that road of consistent validation to eventually become paranoid, which is exactly what he was talking about. And I see people do it all the time. I've done it plenty of times myself, but it's important to recognize like when you're in that state.
It so is, and that resistance that we create, I talk about that distance of resistance of the paranoia and the obsessing on, oh my God, the sky is falling, things are growing, arms and legs, and it always is worth. What's so interesting that I found, in even in the context of the negativity, usually, if not every single time, when we're thinking in that negative direction and what we don't want, what we're worried about, what we're anxious about, better happens.
Right.
But what I want people to also realize is when we do think in faith, in divine, indefinite purpose or intention, believe it or not, usually better happens. We just don't understand or know how these outcomes are to better us. And this combination of faith and wisdom to allow ourselves not to resist the fear, but to actually just stop. And this is such an action of free will. It's easy to resist fear. It's easy to go over it, under it, through it, around it, out logic it, be paranoid about it. That's actually easier than the free will that it takes, that when I'm worried, anxious, or obsessing or paranoid about the worst to come, this eye of the storm, and I use that analogously, not just actually and literally, as you sit there in Naples, Florida, you could be in the eye of the storm. But when you're thinking about the eye of the storm, that paranoia that creates, it does only one thing: bring energy and interferes with the better. It takes so much energy just to stop and to get back to center. And once you're at center, it's quite easy to move into that right direction. I call it the divine direction, the inspired direction, the enthusiastic action. It's quite easy. The procrastination and the paranoia ends. But I was curious, Sean's much more stoic than you and I. Mm-hmm. And I've always been curious what's going on inside the stoicism, in that calm exterior, because me and Lacey, we wear our emotions on our shoulders, and you can see them when we're super happy, and we don't mm-hmm. just give Sean our eyes when we're pissed off. He knows that we're pissed off. Right. And so I was wondering, with a more stoic personality, Sean, how you're handling the eye of the storm, literally and figuratively, coming at you. You have a great investment in your community, and you could be in harm's way. There's a lot you could be worried about. I don't see as much on your face, but what goes on inside, for you comparatively to Lacey and I, who wear our emotions on our shoulder?
Well, I think that a popular answer would be like, oh, somebody who doesn't wear their emotions on their sleeves, which actually is interesting because I'm far more emotional than Lacey. But I think that the reality is it's not that I'm putting on a stoic face, But I remember, well, you remember, and I won't, it was funny, but I won't repeat it because I don't want to offend other people who might have a need to be offended. But when we were first meeting, there was a time that the Meltzer family felt that they had offended me. You had called me and you were like, "Oh my gosh, we didn't mean to offend
It
you."
was Julie that felt. I thought the
Yeah.
shit was funny. It was
Yeah.
Julie that offended.
But I was like, "Oh no, I wasn't offended because I genuinely wasn't." And you were like, "Oh well, that's great to like meet somebody that doesn't have the need to be offended." And that was sort of my introduction into, you know, your teachings around that particular topic. And so I also think that while I agree, like I attempt to navigate life not having a need to be offended, I also think that when you're talking about faith, I attempt to navigate life without having a need to be afraid. And I think that a lot of people have a need to be afraid. A lot of people are just finding, you know, reasons when they wake up, like, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And then that allows them to spend a lot of time and energy in all of this planning for circumstances that are well beyond their control. You know, stockpiling freeze-dried food, stockpiling water, stockpiling toilet paper, stockpiling bullets in case Armageddon breaks out.
He's not talking about me at all.
Right.
But for me, honestly, I think that if I was afraid, I think that people would know it. I think if I was angry, I think that what happens is that oftentimes, like, I've just learned that if Nick came and was really, you know, he said something super offensive to me, I would think for a second, like, wow, like, is Nick really mad at me and he's attacking me, or did he not mean that? And I would try to figure out, like, do I have to actually, you know, be offended, be angry, be upset, be scared, be worried about this? And I think that the reality is the majority of the time not. That's not to say that I don't get worried or afraid. But yeah, I think that it's not that I'm trying to practice stoicism. It's just that I honestly inside, I'm like, everything's going to be okay. It's all going to work out.
Yeah, I think, you know, looking for what we do want is a lesson, and it always ends up better is another lesson within the context of positivity or in faith, that I'm being protected, promoted, and loved, and it does sometimes manifest itself in what others would deem as punishment, or danger or caution is necessary. So understanding that, what precautions do we take when there's an impending threat like a hurricane? There's a varying degree of precautions. Even if we're not afraid, there's a reality. You know, I talk about the difference between caution and danger is caution is a 16-year-old running by the pool. Danger is a 3-year-old running by the pool. And they require different action, and we should take different action determinative upon that. So when we have something circumstantial like a hurricane impending that could hit any, because it really could, right? It's a lottery or about where it's going to hit. It will hit somewhere.
Right.
How do we decide, is this danger, like a 3-year-old running by a pool, or is this just caution that we should take like a 16-year-old running by the pool?
I think that's really interesting because, you know, whenever there's a storm, they use, you know, very similar terms. You can have a hurricane warning, or you can have a hurricane watch. Watch out, there could
or
be
tornado. You guys are from Indy, right? It's tornado warning or watch. Yeah.
In fact, there's lots of
warnings.
tornadoes with hurricanes. Yeah.
Or watch. Yeah. So I think it's a very similar thing, but in reality, I want to further define, you know, we're doing this sort of esoterically, energetically, but I think that I heard Joe Dispenza one time define fear as frozen energy. I love that definition, which is why that would then ultimately lead to procrastination, frozen energy. And I think that the antidote to frozen energy is to liberate energy. I think movement is the antidote, which then is the same thing as saying, like, well, yeah, it leads to procrastination, right? So don't get stuck, don't get frozen. Movement, action is the antidote to fear. because fear is nothing but frozen energy. So I think that in answer to your question, I think that when we assess a situation, we have to not allow ourselves to go backwards, decreasing vibration, decreasing frequency, decreasing activity and movement, but we accelerate. We accelerate our energy, we accelerate our frequency, we accelerate our action and movement. That's the antidote. So it does mean taking precaution, analyzing the situation. It does mean if you are ordered to evacuate, that you move, that you make decisions quickly, that you are decisive, and that you take action for the best. It does mean if your 2-year-old is walking by the pool, that you don't sit there and you think, what's the best outcome here? It means that you immediately take action and you remove the threat, you remove them from that situation. So I think that being decisive, learning how to train your mind to assess a situation and to take action quickly, will allow you to be able to decide like, hey, is this a real threat? Or you assess it quickly and you're like, this isn't something that we're going to, lose sleep over. Listen, for us, we live 5 miles inland, might not sound like a lot. It would take approximately 25 plus feet of storm surge to even reach the water, to reach where we are. We're on the 4th story, the top story of a 4-story building. So the assessment is, and people are like writing me like, you guys are nuts, you got to leave. Listen, this is a brand new build. Our building's not going to get blown over. We're not going to get flooded. The power could go out. That's probably one of the worst things that could happen. And so how do we then begin to take precaution, take action so that we're prepared for that?
That's awesome. You're getting wise in your old age, and happy birthday again. But I want to take this. This is called Book Yourself Solid, and or is that the name of it? What's it called? Book Solid.
Get Book Solid.
Get Book Solid, not Overbooked or Better Options or Better Offers. It's Get Book Solid. So this is predominantly every day in business. And one of the greatest fears in business is there's not going to be business tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And coming into the 4th quarter, getting Book Solid is even more amplified as the same sort of impending either hurricane watch or a hurricane warning. And I see it with the clients that I have and the consulting and coaching that I do, that there's this impending threat of the end of the year not hitting my number by not having or seeing some sort of momentum or decrease in momentum of being and getting booked. So in that respect, Lacey, you have started even a new business coming into the 4th quarter. How do you utilize the lessons that we use in life with an impending threat and equating it to booking ourselves solid in the fear that we don't have enough business coming in?
I think here's a really interesting thing, and I love the Joe Dispenza frozen energy. But what fear has a tendency to do is it shrinks you down in size. It makes you small. It makes you slow in your decision making. And in business, that's a really dangerous thing to have, right? It's a really dangerous place to be in, is to be shrunk down. And so one of the things that I have recognized is that when you can take yourself and put yourself into a different situation and get outside of your comfort zone, maybe it's not in business, maybe it's just something else. You get outside of your comfort zone, really what it does is it begins to push the boundaries of your bandwidth, your emotional capacity, and your vibration. And oftentimes pushing yourself and getting out of your comfort zone elsewhere will allow you to go back into your business situation where you were once fearful and make bigger, better decisions because you're no longer shrunk down. And so I think it's really interesting because so many people, they're obsessing over business is not happening in the 4th quarter. I'm not meeting my numbers. What's going to happen? Am I going to make it? And sometimes it's hard to get yourself out of that spiral. So you need to put yourself in a different position, leverage that to get yourself out of the spiral.
Also, Dave, we have a question from one of the viewers that wants to know, what is your strategy to stop and bring yourself back to center? How do you do that? If you recognize, how do I get back to center?
I already know mine.
Yeah. So for me, it's just elevating, number one, our awareness of the clues and patterns that are indicative of ourselves, of how we react to fear. So I used to worry about fear itself and go down a huge rabbit hole of what I'm afraid of. And I've really cheated the system by saying, look, I'm just looking for clues and patterns of how I react to fear. And then I practice. So whenever someone asks me, how do I get better at this? It's practice of stopping. And I use time as a dependent variable. And I've said that in the realm of, I use time as a dependent variable of all matter, subjective and objective matter. I've really changed that to help explain this to people, that there's a difference between human experience and spiritual experience. And there is a dependent variable, a common denominator of human experience. And the only one that I can think of is time. It's not taxes and it's not death. It's actually time. And so knowing that every human being that is in a human experience is regulated by a common denominator of man-made constructive time. And so the only measurement that I can use that would be relative or aligned with everyone on earth in their human experience would be, how much time does it take me to get back to center so I can see the progress of my practice? And indicative of my behavior will be the progress aligned with the behavior of where I want to be in this matter of responding to the reaction of fear. And so for me, I've been very intentional about my practice of how quickly can I get back to center when I look at the instant and obvious, which is the reaction to fear. Worry, anxiety, and stress are 3 reactions to fear, especially in impending threats that we don't know where and when. Remember, uncertainty causes stress. And so when we have an impending thing like the end of the month or the end of the quarter, and we don't know where or when the outcome is going to hit, meaning our next sale or achievement or accomplishment, that's when we get anxiety and fear, or react to that anxiety and fear that's caused by not knowing where or when. And so I think for me, this impending hurricane of the ending of the quarter and hitting my number or not hitting my number, or when and where this deal is going to close. Because how many times do we force things because something is in our pipeline, or we want to get it into our pipeline, but we really don't know the when or the where. And that when or the where could be, when is the yes coming and where is it going to hit from in our pipeline? Or when is the no is going to come, both having value to me, and where is it going to come from in my pipeline? And so if we focus in on building as many whens and wheres in my pipeline, we invariably will create more confidence and comfortability, allowing us to speed up the process of getting back to center. Because when we get that natural reaction to, oh shit, I'm not going to hit my number, I don't have enough in my pipeline, getting back to center allows us to do what we need to do to get more people into the pipeline, to get booked solid, knowing that we're maximizing the end of the year.
So many things, I think, around getting back to center. And I think it's actually very different for each and every individual. I mean, you know, they talk a lot about having an anchor, like, oh, utilize something for your anchor for success, to remind yourself stepping into that successful vibration. But you should have anchors around recentering, right? Whether it's a certain playlist that you listen to, certain music that just brings you back. Maybe it's exercise, a passion, maybe it's cooking. It doesn't have to also be business related, but you need to figure out for you whatever anchor is required, that you just tap into that anytime you're feeling off balance, right? And I think so it's really important. Hurricane.
Lacey, you must be an old soul, because you're not old enough to have that much wisdom. We expected it from Sean, as old as he is now, but it's incredible how much wisdom you have.
Hey, I'm working on it all the time. I'll say one last thing about fear, though, I think is really interesting. I know that there's a lot of people out there that live a lot in their head. And sometimes when you're in a state of fear, you're living here, you're not living here. And it's really hard to take yourself out of fear energetically or emotionally. So sometimes you have to face the fear and feed it with information. And I'm not talking about information that reinforces your current belief system around it, but like actual information. Like going into this hurricane, I had no idea. Like, this is our first hurricane. I didn't know hurricane scales, how they worked, how people, looked at the tracks, what was a category 3 or a category 5? Which way do they spin? How do they build? I had no information. And without information, I can create any reality that I want. But if I'm in a state of fear, that reality is not a good one. And so for me, a lot of times what I will do when I'm feeling fearful is I'll do as much as I can to educate myself around the subject or the topic, because that helps me move farther away in my logical mind from that fear-based state, because I no longer can create this false reality if I understand truth.
I'll
Or
wrap.
we could have just I was gonna send it to you to come hang out with the Meltzers and celebrate Sean's 65th birthday.
Yeah.
Yes. I'll wrap up with this a couple thoughts on that same thing. I was fortunate to have been last weekend in Little Rock playing golf with our good friend Grant Dennis and his member guest, and we were fortunate to win our flight, which means that we got put on into the shootout with a lot of people watching. And it was Grant's first tournament that he had ever played. But one of the things that I love to play competitive golf. Not to say that I'm good. I just love to be in the environment of competitive golf, because it puts that pressure, that fear, when people are watching you hit golf shots. And so this is what I've learned, is whether it's on the golf course with people watching, or hurricane, or trying to close the deals to meet your quotas for the quarter or the month, is that whole concept of control the controllables. But I'll tell you, being in the healthcare space, in your body, of your vital functions, the only vital function that you can actually control is your breathing. So one of the things that I like to get back to center is to recognize, and listen, there's 9 million breathwork techniques, but to recognize that you can control your breathing. And so many times we're disconnected from that. So on the golf course, what I found is all I have to do is tell myself, I can't even control where this shot's going to go, but I can control my breathing. So I'll control my breathing as I walk up into that shot. And then the majority of the time it works out well. But even if it doesn't work out well, I understand it's not the shot that I made, it's how I react to that shot. And so the same thing, I think, in all of this, if you were trying to close more sales, you need more leads, you're worried about a hurricane, you have to be able to really understand that you have to control what you can control. And if you need a reminder, just focus on your breathing. You can breathe shallow, you can breathe deep, you can breathe fast, you can breathe slow. It's up to you. You can control that. And then understand that, listen, amongst all the other variables, I can't control my heart rate. I can't control how many platelets I have, all the other variables. It really is a matter of how I react to the circumstance. And I can control that. Like, I have control over that. So I can hit a bad shot and throw a club, or I can hit a bad shot and then, move on and try and figure out what I'm doing next. It's all up to me. So I think that's one of the best ways to get back to center, is to really ask yourself, what can I control? And I can control my breathing, and I can control how I react to the situation. And as long as I'm reacting properly, things generally work out for the best for all of us. Like you said, the forces of the world don't want to see you lose. The forces of the universe want to see you win.
Yeah, I want to remind people, because I know the fourth quarter brings in business, when we're looking at Get Book Solid, that more deals are done in the fourth quarter than the rest of the year. More money is spent, bigger budgets than the rest of the year. More deals are closed than the rest of the years. So instead of worrying about any of those things, stick to the information, like Lacey said, and be confident and comfortable in the fact that if I do my best and learn those lessons, that the deals will come. And the more that I focus in on that and stop, drop, and roll by breathing to remind, remember, and recollect with the blessings in our life, we will be protected, promoted, and loved, just like I protect, promote, and on Dill. I love you both. Thank you.
All right, everybody, make sure that you catch David Meltzer on the Meltzer World Tour all over the place. You can catch Lacey and I as well, bouncing around, but just not nearly as often as David. October 30th, we're in SoFi. We'll be out there. And then in November 15th and 16th, We'll be in New York City doing some stuff together. So if you want to be around the three of us, got Nikki in the back, the four of us, you want to get around that energy, make sure you hit us up. We would love to have you to be a part of anything and everything that we're doing. All right, folks, have a fantastic Tuesday. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to